Hi, I'm Elizabeth Mariani. I'm the president of the LIS Alumni Board this year, and we're so excited to have you here for our 28th Stone Lecture event, featuring our very own David Shumaker. Before we begin the evening, I'd like to announce a couple of reminders. We are opening a call for nominations for the Alumni Board for the next academic year. We're going to send out an email for that. So we welcome nominations, self-nominations, to serve on this board. And it involves hosting events like tonight, as well as networking events. So yeah, we would appreciate it if you consider volunteering for serving on the board. Also, we're accepting newsletter submissions. So if you'd like to share some news, if you got a new job or something interesting is going on at your work, a new project, new initiative, and you'd like to share that with your CUA LIS community, you're welcome to email submissions to our CUA LIS Alumni Board email address. We'll also be raffling some prizes today, so definitely check out our table up front after the lecture. And lastly, reception is to follow, so definitely stick around. Yes. I'd like to give special thanks to our alumni board who work really hard and dedicate their time to make sure these events are successful, as well as our LIS department. Special thanks to Louise and Margaret and Dr. Choi for all your support and help. And with that, I will continue on to my colleague to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for tonight. Dave Shumaker has over 35 years of experience in the library field. He literally wrote the book on embedded library and has been teaching with the library program here at CUA since 2006. Sadly, this will be his last semester teaching. He's retiring from teaching here, and I know he'll be sorely missed. Dave was one of my first and favorite professors here in the library program, and anyone who's had a class with him knows that he is both a thoughtful and thought-provoking professor. But we're not here to talk about the past, we're here to talk about the future. So without further ado, join me in welcoming Dave Shumaker.
Well, David and Elizabeth, thank you for the introduction. I'm really thrilled to be doing this, and I want to start by telling the Alumni Board how grateful I am to have this opportunity. I want to really thank everyone who's worked on putting this event together, especially our hardworking and overworked department office staff, Louise and Margaret. So really appreciate their work. And I'm also honored that all of you have chosen to be here tonight. My wife Donna and my daughter Kristen are sitting in the front row, and they didn't have much of a choice, but the rest of you did. And so thank you for deciding to come. Let's see if I can get the video mute off, and there we are. I wanted to start, before anything else, with a couple of moments remembering Betty Stone. I went up to Aquinas Hall to the CUA archives the other day, and I went through a couple of file folders of material that they keep about her up there. From all accounts, she was really a dynamic leader, and she was also a wife and a mother. And here she is as Washington, D.C. Mother of the Year for 1980. Reading about her and all that she did, balancing work and family, made me think of Sheryl Sandberg in the book Lean In. You know, Betty Stone was Sheryl Sandberg before there was Sheryl Sandberg. But what I found most appealing are the little things that revealed something about her personality. She liked to tell a joke on herself. Here's one. She had a collection of artwork featuring owls, and we still have some of it upstairs in the department. Well, apparently much of it was given to her by staff and faculty of the department. And according to the files, she liked to say that she thought when they gave her these things that they were honoring her for her wisdom, right? The owl's a symbol of wisdom. But then they told her no. It was because she habitually stayed late at the office, working far into the night. She was a night owl. So I also like this line from an American Library's report on the American Library Association Conference of 1982. And here's the quote. Outgoing President Elizabeth Stone proved herself one of ALA's all-time delightful impresarios in a series of extravaganzas that began with audience warm-up exercises and climaxed with the unveiling of the U.S. commemorative stamp she fostered. And here's the stamp, but you know, I would really have liked to have been there for those warm-up exercises. My own recollection reinforces this sense of who she was. I only met her once, and it was in 1999 or 2000 when I was involved in the leadership of the SLA Washington, D.C. chapter. And we had our holiday party in those years over at the Arts Club of Washington. I see a few heads nodding at people who were there. And one of the highlights was drawing for door prizes. It was my job to hand out the prizes. Well, Betty won a pair of those silly oversized glasses, you know, that like would fit somebody with a head the size of a basketball. And as I handed them to her, she immediately put them on and turned to the audience, clowning and enjoying the moment. She laughed and everybody laughed with her. So that's the Betty Stone that I knew, however slightly. Someone who took her work seriously, tremendously seriously, and accomplished a tremendous amount for our profession. But she didn't take herself too seriously at all. Truly, I think that's a model that we all should try to emulate. Well, predicting the future. Predicting the future is something that we all try to do every day, but it's not so easy. As it's been said, predictions are hard, especially about the future. So we rely on all kinds of ridiculous methods to help us. And I'm no exception. If any of my past students in human information behavior or management are here, they know that I'm very interested in cognitive psychology and behavioral economics and the application of those disciplines and fields to how we use information. In both courses, we talk about the work of Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman and others on how snap judgments based on rules of thumb or heuristics influence our decisions and make us subject to biases and generally threaten to lead us astray. I advocate cool, calm reflection and rational thought when assessing courses of action and making predictions. Yet the truth is, I'm subject to a host of non-rational influences, as I suspect we all are. Here's an example. Few of you will remember this, but before I came to CUA full-time in fall of 2006, I spent the fall semester of 2005 on sabbatical from the MITRE Corporation, here full-time as information professional in residence. Now, at a faculty Christmas get-together in that 2005 term, right before the holidays, we had a drawing for some little assorted door prizes. Well, guess what I drew? I drew the Grow a Teacher toy that you see here. You just add water and a teacher emerges from the little capsule. The part about all A's for all students, that part never did come true, but I took it as an omen that I was meant to become a full-time academic, a future that I had been contemplating. It allowed me to feel confident in predicting that my future lay in teaching and not staying in the corporate world. So my prediction came true. A few years later, another omen helped me predict the future once again. Now, from time to time, my wife Donna and I like to go to our local Chinese restaurant. It used to be run by a gentleman named Dave, and I still refer to it as Dave's. One of the things that I love about Dave's is it has the best fortune cookies on earth. It's not that they taste great, but the fortunes are amazing. So on one occasion, in about 2010, I received the fortune you see here. You have a wonderful way with words and should write a book. Now this was just at the period that at the time I was beginning a period of active writing and speaking about embedded librarianship. So of course, when I got the fortune, it meant I had to write the book. Well, you see where I'm going with this. I don't really advocate predicting the future based on fortune cookies and assorted omens. But in many cases, the things that reinforce ideas about what we already want to do help motivate us. They help us believe that we can create the future we want. So my first principle of predicting the future is that in fact the future is not something that happens to us, it's something we create. As the internet pioneer Alan Kay said years ago, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. So, if we can create our future, the next logical question is, what kind of future do we want to create? That's a big question. For tonight, I'm going to confine my remarks to just a few highlights of the future I envision for the profession of librarianship. Some of this is new, and some of this represents the future that I've been working towards during my entire time here at CUA. The first point is librarianship is one profession. It must remain so, and it must become even more strongly unified. I'm sad to say that many people in our field don't share this view. And it is easy to look at the many different things librarians do and the different settings we work in and decide that, say, a school media specialist on the one hand and a corporate knowledge manager on the other practice in such different settings and do such different things that they've become two different professions. But I don't buy that. You could say the same thing about doctors. Compare a country general practitioner to the head of oncology research at the National Institutes of Health. Aren't they just as different? Yet they're both doctors. They share their medical education and they share the Hippocratic Oath. By the way, I was encouraged on this point actually by the IFLA Global Vision document that came out just recently. One of the statements in that document goes like this: the most important key finding from the Global Vision discussion is the discovery that we're globally united in our goals. Across regions, library types, and length of engagement with libraries, we share a deep commitment to the enduring value and role of libraries. So, what are our unifying principles? I'd say there are two: our fundamental knowledge base and our mission. The knowledge base consists of insights we've developed into the nature of information, the role it plays, in human events and the principles of how people interact with it. Human information behavior. And I don't know if you can see the visual here. This is the competencies document that we did a couple of years ago in the Special Libraries Association, which I think is a pretty good document, but I'm biased on that. Now, what about the mission? Other people have put that far better than I can. David Lankus, now at the University of South Carolina, is one of the guiding lights, I believe, to the future of our profession. In his powerful book, The Atlas of New Librarianship, he says that our mission as librarians is to improve society through facilitating knowledge creation in our communities. Another person, whoops, let's go forward. There's David. Another person that I have learned a great deal from is Valerie Gross, who's CEO of the public library system just close by in Howard County, Maryland. She puts it more succinctly. Libraries, her motto is libraries equals education. Under her leadership, her library system, following that motto, has developed partnerships and programs that address the informal, formal, and continuing education needs of all ages and all communities throughout that county. And the library has thrived as a result. And finally, a law firm marketing manager that I interviewed in the course of my research on embedded librarianship said that the librarian made other staff smarter. Because of her, said this manager, everybody does such a better job. And by the way, it turns out that Betty Stone expressed a very similar idea. I just found this when I was up in the archives. In a letter dated June 13th, 1981, to Stephen K. Badzik, then CUA Public Information Officer, she was apparently following up on a conversation that they had had the day before about what the role of the library would be when, and this is a quote, people could have terminals in their own home to access information. Now, actually, think of that conversation happening in 1981. That was a very far-sighted conversation to even have. You know, Ken Olson was still saying there was no reason for anybody to have a computer in their home. Anyway, what Betty wrote in that letter was, the librarian must be an educator. And a few weeks later, in her inaugural address as president of ALA, she wrote approvingly of what she called the role of libraries in becoming a powerful force in the emerging field of non-traditional study. So it seems like Betty really got it about librarians facilitating knowledge creation equals education, and she was ahead of her time. So, choose your wording, but whichever turn of phrase you prefer, these folks are saying the same thing, and that's our unifying mission. So, the assertion that librarianship is one profession focused on education, knowledge creation, making everybody smarter, leads easily to the next principle of the future, which is that we must value ourselves above our organizations. We know that as a profession we've always been too self-effacing, and we put libraries above librarians. That's a mistake. And what's worse, it's not accurate. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not attacking libraries. Libraries are great institutions, and they do a very effective job in the right time and place with the right leadership. But what's critical is not the institution, it's the mission and the people who carry it out. Let me put it like this. What's our job, really? Is it A, run libraries, or B, facilitate knowledge creation, or C, educate, or D, help everybody get smarter? My answer? It's B, C, and D. In his book, Managing for the Future, Peter Drucker tells the story of the nun who was running a Catholic hospital chain in the southwestern United States. She had the insight that her job and the job of everyone in that hospital wasn't running a hospital, it was to deliver health care. So when she saw that decentralized clinics and outpatient centers could lead to improvements in healthcare delivery, she established a network of them because she understood what the real mission was. Now, I may be taking a little bit of a liberty here, but I don't think it's too much of a stretch to imagine that if S.R. Ranganathan were to come back and visit us in our post-World Wide Web 21st century, he'd get this too. You'll remember his fifth law of librarianship from the 1930s. The library is a growing organism. To make sure this point was understood, he reminded his readers that, as he says, the dissemination of knowledge, which is the vital function of libraries, might be carried out, quote, even by means other than those of the printed book, 1931. Can we extend that just a bit and imagine that the library might not always be the best place for education to take place, for knowledge to be disseminated? And so librarians should not always work in libraries. We need to work at the critical places where knowledge work needs us, be that a classroom, a conference room, or a library. So let's emphasize that librarians are the meta-knowledge workers of our time, that we may not always work in libraries, and not everybody who works in a library is a librarian. Let's emphasize the professional knowledge that enables us to be effective, and let's recognize that the library, much as we love it, is really just an instrument and not the core of the mission. Let's take stock of the vision so far. We must create our own future, not leave it to others. That's how we will predict it. And the future we must create involves a profession of librarianship that's unified, not balkanized, and values its members and their mission above the institutions where they work. Those are the easy parts. Now for a couple of hard parts. Because I believe if we're going to succeed with this vision, we have to up our game. And we have to challenge a couple of our core principles. We're going to have to do this because leadership demands that we confront some key issues of information in contemporary society. If we don't, we will become irrelevant. And then it won't matter whether we're united or not. So the two paramount issues that we need to confront are privacy and intellectual freedom. They're linked, but they're distinct. So let's talk about privacy first. We bill ourselves as strong advocates of personal privacy. Librarians in the public sector especially claim to be virtuous because why? They destroy information about the actions of library users. Some of them even destroy all personally identifiable data about who borrowed what book the very day the book's returned. Just a couple of years ago, a member of the ALA Washington staff was quoted accurately, as she personally assured me, as approving of this practice. Authors I've read recently continue to advocate it, and I think there are several problems with it. First is, to me, this is really a joke. In this modern society, when our appliances, our cars, our houses are spying on us and relaying every detail of our lives to the great marketing databases in the cloud. There was more from Facebook today. In fact, to the sophisticated corporate or government snoop, library data are all but irrelevant. They can get what they need lots of other ways. The second is, this extreme attitude prevents us from offering all kinds of useful services. I'll give you one simple example. My local public library in Montgomery County, Maryland, tells me that it deletes the record that I've borrowed a given book the day after I return the book. By doing that, it's unable to offer me a service that I'd find really helpful because my memory's going. I need to keep a record of the books I've borrowed. So I'm forced to do it in other ways that are much more burdensome to me. And that's just for starters. Think of the many valuable services that we could be building on those records. Recommender services, communities of interest, and more. And by the way, I'm not picking just on Montgomery County here. In the fall term, I assigned students to look for privacy policies on public library websites. And they came back with some good practices and an array of really appalling practices as well. Lack of transparency, restrictive practices. But the third problem that we have with privacy is the most serious, because it seems to me that in effect, libraries are dictating what shall be done with personal information. We really don't give our users much of a choice. And when we're doing that, we're really playing the same game as Equifax and Google and Amazon and Facebook and all the rest of the corporate exploiters of our information. In effect, with their click-through licenses that nobody looks at and their policies that are never, and their actions that are never shared, they're saying your data is our data and we'll decide what to do with it. Seems to me the principle ought to be my data is my data. And you must concede my right to decide and carry out my wishes. Not with some click-through license, but with meaningful options. So what if our profession created a model policy and a practice that gave individuals real control over their own data? What if we all followed those leading libraries that already offer their members opportunities to receive enhanced services? What if we actively promoted and advocated to spread it? Here's what I think would happen. We'd establish ourselves as leaders of society in enriching personal freedom and privacy. The second principle we need to re-examine is intellectual freedom. Now, we must remain true to intellectual freedom, don't get me wrong. But our concept of what intellectual freedom is too narrow and it's too simplistic. We've got to broaden it, and we've got to grapple with the very real dilemmas that our society's confronting. Here's what I mean. We're too hung up on censorship. We equate intellectual freedom with freedom from censorship. Look at the Library Bill of Rights. It only speaks of censorship. But as Zeynep Tufekci, associate professor at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, School of Information and Library Services, wrote in the February issue of Wired magazine, the most effective forms of censorship today involve meddling with trust and attention, not muzzling speech. We're looking at the wrong thing. We're not looking where the biggest problem is. The Library Bill of Rights does not address this. The social critic Neil Postman identified this danger over 30 years ago in his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. There, Postman contrasted the two dystopias of the post-World War II era. On the one hand, we have George Orwell with 1984 and Animal Farm. On the other, we have Aldous Huxley with Brave New World. Orwell was preoccupied with traditional censorship, with muzzling speech. But Huxley wrote of a different future, where we were too busy being entertained to care anymore about the truth. A future in which we made a deal. Drown out the truth. Fine. Just keep us entertained. Postman wrote, "There are two ways by which the spirit of a culture may be shriveled. In the first, the Orwellian, culture becomes a prison. In the second, the Huxleyan, culture becomes a burlesque." Sound like today? It sounds like today to me. Facebook promotes stories based on how arresting they are. Google promotes them based on how much advertising they sell. Neither one of them has any real allegiance to the truth. Trolls? Fine. Bart Farms? Fine. Just let us find ways to keep people on the edge of their seats. You don't have to censor the truth if you can drown it out with empty, titillating lies. So if we librarians really want to defend intellectual freedom, and I believe we must, then we need to deal with this. We need to update the Library Bill of Rights. We need to recognize there is a thing called truth. All points of view are not equally valid. We cannot be neutral. We're starting a debate in the profession now on are librarians really neutral? Should we really be neutral? And I hope that debate rages on, and I have a particular point of view on that. So our allegiance must be to the truth and to the values of civil discourse, not to absolutist views of free expression, not to allowing trolls, bots, and agents of disinformation to drown out the truth. Now, this is not a fully worked out proposal. I do not underestimate the ethical challenges that arise the moment that I say not all points of view are equally valid. But what I'm saying is we need to engage with these dilemmas and not run away from them. The time we can have that luxury is over. And by the way, I discovered that Betty Stone said something that may be applicable here. Maybe I'm putting too many words in her mouth, but in a letter to the editor of American Libraries published in the December 1977 issue, she wrote, "Librarians," and this is the quote, "must become skilled as evaluative mediators of information." Evaluators are not neutral. All right? So maybe she would have recognized the problems that we're now seeing today. Okay. That's the profession, the future that I predict for our profession. That's the future I've been working towards, the future I want to work towards. But I want to back up a step and address one more question. If it's the case that we predict the future by creating it, then the question I haven't talked about yet is, how do we create it? Let's explore that in a bit more depth. So I'd suggest 5 steps each of us can take to create the future. These are adapted from the work of a management writer by the name of Jim Collins. Step 1. Step 1, take responsibility, be a leader, resolve that you can make a difference, you will make a difference. This is the beginning of leadership. You don't have to be charismatic, probably better if you're not. What you do have to have is a desire to take responsibility and what Jim Collins calls fierce resolve to make a difference. And don't put it off, because as Gilda Radner, as Rosanna Dana used to say, it's always something, so do it now. Step 2, find the right people to work with. Who shares your vision? Who shares your sense of responsibility and your determination to make a difference? Make those people your partners. Step 3, confront reality. Jim Collins calls this confront the brutal truth. Do not sugarcoat situations. Lies are odious, and the worst lies are the ones we tell ourselves. I think this is a great danger of our age because we have this idea around that perception is reality. Perception is not reality. So challenge yourself, challenge your assumptions, challenge them more when they make you comfortable. Step 4, be the best. Devote yourself to what you're best at, build on strengths, do what you believe in. And step 5, stay focused and don't quit. Abide in hope and faith that despite whatever challenges there may be, we will succeed. So there it is. That's how I advocate predicting the future. But the future is yours. Yours to predict, yours to invent. I hope you found my predictions appealing. And most of all, I hope you'll leave here tonight and go out and continue to do all the good work that you're already doing to invent the future and do it more strongly and more powerfully than ever. And as for me, I'm headed back to Dave's for another fortune cookie. Thank you.